presentation here. Um, Hopefully you all can see this. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about what is a weed. Basically, it's a plant that's growing out of place. I'm going to kind of go over this first, kind of I guess the general weed stuff kind of quickly. I did a presentation back in summer, late summer, with Christian. It's on his YouTube channel that kind of covers more of this in depth. And kind of more towards the end of this is going to be kind of more of the timely stuff that we're going to be that's going to be more timely as to what you're going to kind of be wanting to focus on right now. Um, but we are going to talk a little bit about what some of the general weed stuff, identifying the types of weeds and the different nomenclatures and things like that, talking and the different things like that, just so we can have a good foundation in how to describe a weed or how the best way to go about controlling these weeds are. So a plant growing out of place is what's considered a weed. That can be a St. Augustine grass growing in our flower beds. That can be a stalk of corn growing in our soybean fields. I mean, that can be anything you want it to be, anything that's a plant that we don't want that's growing in a place that we don't want it. Or it can cause irregular growth. They typically have some type of irregular growth compared to what's growing around it, which for us in our lawn, that typically means frequent mowing. Because they don't grow at the same rate as our turf grass does. So we have to go out there and mow a little more often. They absorb the nutrients in the water that we put out there for our turf grass or that the rain provides. So they're kind of suckers. They suck off the stuff that we would like for our turf grass to use. A lot of times these things can be considered beneficial. Some can even be edible. Some of your dandelions and some of your flowers and things can be considered edible. And they can also attract pollinators. So no, they're not always just bad. They're just, some of them can be unsightly and they can be irregular compared to the rest of our turf. So if we're looking for that uniformity, um, that's not a good way to get uniformity unless you have a complete yard of nothing but weeds of the same weed, and then obviously your turf grass may be considered a weed. So a little bit more about identification. We've got three different types of weeds. We have grasses, broadleaves, and sedges. And then once we get into those, we break those down even further. We have, based on their life cycle, we have annuals, biennials, and perennials. Annuals live for 1 year, set seed, and die. Biennials live for 2 years. So the first year they grow vegetatively. The second year they grow reproductively, flower, then set seed, and then die. And then perennials, they live for many years. And then we can also break them down into their seasonal pattern of emergence, winter and summer annuals. So the winter annuals obviously are going to germinate in the fall, grow throughout the winter, set seed in the spring, and then die. Summer annuals are going to germinate in the spring, grow throughout the summer, and then in the fall, they're typically going to set flower, set seed, and then die themselves. So an annual, again, only lives one season or 1 year. So when we're talking about the grasses, grasses typically have parallel veins. They're usually round and hollow stems. Easy way to think of this is bamboo, like down there on the bottom left. Bamboo is actually a grass. It's a very large grass, but it is a grass. They typically have very inconspicuous flowers. They don't have real showy flowers like we think about with azaleas and hibiscus and things like that. Obviously those aren't grasses, but just the very far end extreme of the showy flowers is the inconspicuous flower. So you can see here, this up here in the top right, it's going to be a centipede seed head, and that's the flower. So you can see it's very inconspicuous. It's not real showy, not going to attract a lot of insects or pollinators, butterflies, things like that, because typically most all these are going to be pollinated by wind or something typically like that. So like corn, for instance, the tassel on the top isn't very showy. It depends on when to pollinate it. So, and grasses can either be annual or perennial. So we can either have annual grasses that live for 1 year, or we can have perennial grasses, which hopefully that's what your yard is, a perennial, or your turf in your lawn is a perennial. So you're not out there planting it every year. They can probably get rather expensive and probably pretty old pretty quick. We have broadleaves opposite the grasses. They have a branched vein pattern within the leaves. Obviously, this is, like dollarweed down here in the bottom center, Virginia buttonweed over here on the right with the little white flower, chamber bitter or little mimosa down here on the bottom left with all the little seeds underneath the leaves. They have a branched vein pattern. They typically have a round stem also. They can sometimes have a little bit showier flowers, just like this Virginia buttonweed over here on the bottom right or on the top right. And these also can either be an annual, biennial, or a perennial. So our grasses, typically we don't see many biennial grasses, but we do see some biennial broadleaves as well as the annuals and perennials. Then we have sedges, the third group. They do have a kind of a grass-like appearance, like nut sedge. If it's a big mat of it growing together, it could be confused and look like a grass. But typically they have a triangular stem, or they always have a triangular stem, not typically, but in that top picture, you can see that if you do a cross section of it, it is a very definite triangular stem. And if you roll these within your finger, between your fingers, you can feel those three sides or three edges along the stems. These are typically considered a perennial, but they typically have nuts or tubers that grow underneath the ground that they resprout from. So we treat them like perennials, even though they're more or less, unless you live on the coast where they typically don't go dormant or don't die back, which they typically do even there. But there are some places where in some, in some very sheltered microclimates and things where they may persist for longer. But they're typically annuals, even though we consider them a perennial and treat them like a perennial, just because of the way we use to kill them or control them. They do have a little bit showier flower than grasses. You can see here, this yellow nut sedge here in this flower bed, got a much showier flower. Again, it's not like the azaleas or your hibiscus or anything like that, but it's still much more showy compared to the grasses. And these are usually controlled with a post-emergent herbicide as compared to a pre-emergent herbicide. So a lot of our other grasses and broadleaves we can control with a pre-emergent, especially our annuals are a lot easier to, or what we typically are controlling with pre-emergence or our annuals or our seeded varieties of plants that come back that germinate from seed. It's hard to, a pre-emergence typically don't work on your perennials because they're coming back from some type of rhizome or some type of underground structure that that the pre-emergent barrier just isn't effective at controlling. So then we break it down into life cycles. We have annuals, again, complete one life cycle in a year. All root stems and leaves die annually. They come back from the seed. These are what we're going to be looking to control with our pre-emergent herbicides. But even if we don't catch them with the pre-emergent, we can control most all of these with some type of post-emergence. So the ones that we're going to look at into kind of timely information are both of these pictures here. Crabgrass down here in the bottom center. That's kind of what we're going to be trying to prevent by putting out a pre-emergent right now or within the next few weeks. Crabgrass germinates when the soil temperature hits about 55 to 60 degrees. So, that's getting pretty close. It'll soil temperatures obviously will go back down after this big cold front. So, you know, that'll drop them, that'll give us a little bit of extra time. But typically the middle of February to the 1st of March is kind of our time frame to put out a pre-emerge for our summer weeds, which is a crabgrass, or our summer annuals. One that we want to treat right now that was a winter annual is this one over here on the right, which is poana, or annual bluegrass. That's probably something that you're seeing in your yard right now, fully grown, has these little white seed heads on it. On your turf grass situation, what type of turf grass you have, simazine or atrazine may be a good option for you to post-emergent control of that. Something like Monument may be another option. But typically we want to try, that's again, those are both annuals. The crabgrass is the summer annual, the poana is a winter annual. So to control the poana with a pre-emergent, we needed to put that pre-emergent out late August, beginning of September, because that poana, it actually germinated back in October, sometime around end of September, October time frame. So we needed to apply our pre-emergent late summer, early fall, and then it would have helped prevent poana or annual bluegrass from coming up. So our life cycle for our biennials, again, these take 2 growing seasons to complete their life cycle. First year, they produce a rosette of leaves and they grow vegetatively. A carrot is one, Queen's Anne lace, otherwise carrot, wild carrot. The thistles are another one. Second year, they elongate their stems. They grow along kind of a stalk or flower, and then they flower and seed formation, and then they die, obviously. So, and then obviously we have our perennials, our dandelions, our garlics, our onions. These persist for many growing seasons. Typically only the top portion of the plant dies annually, and then the roots stay viable and produce either a rhizome or something, or some structure or tuber, some type of structure that allows it to regrow every year. And these do reproduce by both seed and vegetatively. And these we typically treat with just post-emergent herbicides instead of both pre and post. Then we break it down. We have cool season, which, like I mentioned there, I kind of alluded to earlier. Poana, which is in the top right, and henbit, which is this one on the bottom left here with the little purple flower. Probably a lot of y'all are seeing that in your yard or in your neighbors or around a lot. It's kind of in full flower right now. Kind of creates a big mat of green and purple. These emerge in the late summer, early fall, and then they set the seed in the spring, and then they die. So we want to apply pre-emerge in the late summer, September, early September through October. Typically late August, depending on the location. Obviously, the coastal counties, you can be a little bit later. The northern counties, northern Mississippi, you want to be a little bit earlier in that time frame, because y'all's cooler temperatures, soil temperatures get cooler a little bit earlier. So again, pre-emerge in late summer. There's a lot of different pre-emerge for products that are available. I do recommend, and you'll see a list of references on the back. There's a great publication that Mississippi State Extension has, Establish and Manage Your Home Lawn. Pages 23, 24, and 25 have quite a few tables on them. There's a table talking about your turf grass's tolerance to different herbicides. And there's another table, how well a particular chemical in a pre-emergence works on certain weeds. So if you have a certain weed that you're really trying to battle, you'll want to go through that table and pick a product that really controls that weed that you're battling pretty well, or pretty good, and then there's another post-emergence table that says it's got a bunch of different weeds, and it basically does the same thing. It tells you how well a particular post-emergent herbicide controls a particular weed. So you'll want to go through there, cross-reference what weed you're battling, how well that product does, and then go back to the other table and make sure that that particular herbicide is safe to use on your turf grass. Uh-oh, I think I accidentally exited out of there. Yes, publication number is P1322. Publication 1322. So if you just go to Google and type in MS State P1322, it should take you straight to it. So that is a great publication. Highly recommended you do that. Again, there's just a wide variety. I'll be more than happy to answer as best I can if you have any particular questions. But I do recommend you look at that publication online or get one, pick it up from your local extension office. They should all have copies. It's pretty popular. And then we have warm season emergence. Again, just the opposite of the cool season. These emerge in the late or mid to late spring when the soil temps hit 55 to 60 degrees for a week or so. Again, these include the spurges, your lespedizas, which is up here on the right, kind of looks like a spurge. This is a spurge that we typically see growing in compacted areas and high traffic areas, or even in cracks in the concrete, things like that. And then we have crabgrass, which is a summer annual over here on the bottom left. These are usually killed by the first frost. And then again, we want to apply pre-emerge in the late winter or early spring. I think I got a couple more questions here in the chat. Oh. Yep, I see Jessica just posted the link to the Establish and Manage Your Home Loan publication. Thank you, Jessica, for doing that. There we go. So the spring pre-emergence application, we're going to apply that in late winter, early spring. These are going to prevent our problematic summer weeds, which is crabgrass, spurge, lespedeza, goosegrass. I don't have goosegrass pictured on here, but that's going to be another problem one that we typically see in high traffic areas, typically in areas that's very compacted, things like that around walkways or pathways, things like places like that. So excuse me. So something to think about. So what you're seeing out there right now, obviously, if it's full grown, if it's flowering like that hen bit, those are ones that that we're seeing now. That now, obviously, it's too late to treat these with a pre-emergence. So right now, we need to look at these. What are our options for controlling with the post-emergence herbicide? So what we're out there seeing right now, I walked around for a little while this afternoon, and this morning we had our little tree giveaway. So today is Arbor Day, Mississippi's Arbor Day, and it is a great day to plant a tree. There's plenty of rain, plenty of moisture in the soil. The ground's still kind of cool. So if you have any trees or landscape plants to plant, I know it's kind of rough out there being kind of cool, but this is good tree planting weather. I know a lot of you guys may hate to hear that because you don't want to get out in this, but it really is a good day good time to plant trees or plant shrubs, anything like that. Any kind of bare root or containerized seedling or anything like that, it's a good time for it. So what we're seeing out there right now, what I saw the majority of in our yard, I guess you could call it, here around our office, a lot of annual bluegrass and a whole lot of henbit, which is this flower here, this plant here in the middle, top left, with the purple flower, kind of has a rosette whirling leaf structure around the stem of the plant. Once it gets this big, it's kind of tough to kill. It's kind of putting all of its energy into flowering. So you're probably about a month late or so on really getting a good control over that with the post-emergent herbicide. But this little rascal down here on the bottom right is what you really want to try to get a hold of right now, and that's lawn burrweed. That's what's known as stickers, what a lot of people just call sticker weed. Uh, for May, and you walk out there barefoot, and you don't walk out there barefoot very long. It kind of tells you to put some shoes on pretty quick. But if you can go ahead and spray it now with a post emerge, you can prevent it from really getting the stickers, and it's not a problem. Again, it's best to treat 4 out of these 5. Obviously, this one down here on the bottom left, which is dandelion, is a perennial. So it's really kind of tough to treat that one with a pre-emergence. You kind of have to do that post-emerge and just kind of stay on top of it. But this Carolina geranium, which is down here in the bottom center, sorry. Down here on the bottom center is Carolina geranium, lawn burrweed on the bottom right, henbit top left, and annual bluegrass in the top right. Those 4 on the right and in the center, those are going to be best controlled with a pre-emergent herbicide in the late fall or late summer, early fall, before they ever even, and then that's going to prevent you from ever even having to worry about them. You'll never see them, and once you do that for a couple of years and kind of get that seed bank worn out, you'll probably start seeing some more weeds start to pop up, and some more weeds becoming problem. But that's a good sign that you've kind of worn out that seed bank, and you've kind of eliminated all of those henbit seeds or annual bluegrass seeds, whatever it is you're having a problem with. You've kind of eliminated that out of your seed bank, so you can start focusing on something else. Because obviously a healthy turf is, your best weed control. So you can see here this lawn burrweed and things that's kind of growing in looks like an area that's kind of close to concrete, and it looks like it's kind of scalped down or something. That's not a thick lush turf right there. So having that thick lush turf kind of prevents that sunlight from getting down into the canopy to allow those seeds to germinate. So again, lawn or weed pre-emergent, fall pre-emergence is your best option against what we're seeing out there right now. But right now it's too late to do that. So treat these with a post-emerge. And typically 4 out of these 5, you're going to be able to treat with a Trimec type product. Depending on your type of grass, obviously, again, that's not a end all be all recommendation. Again, make sure it's labeled, read the label, and follow the label on whatever product you purchase. If it says that it's safe to use on St. Augustine or centipede, make sure, double check that before you purchase it and apply it. So any winter broadleaves that you have now, like henbit, lawn burrweed, dandelion, etc., you want to use a Trimec type product, which contains 2,4-D, dicamba, MCPP, and carfentrazone or sulfentrazone. A lot of them are going to include those these days. Most of the time, those are pretty safe for all 4 of our southern lawns, Bermuda, zoysia, centipede, and St. Augustine, but some of them may not be for St. Augustine and centipede. So make sure that product that you purchase is labeled to be safe to be applied to those. Sometimes some of those products may have a reduced rate for centipede or St. Augustine. Just for instance, this isn't the rate, but just say if it says 1 ounce per gallon of water or per 1,000 square feet for Bermuda and zoysia, it may recommend doing only a 1/2 ounce per gallon of water or 1,000 square feet on St. Augustine or centipede. So make sure you read that label good and fully and follow it to a T, because you can, a lot of these, especially your St. Augustine and your centipedes, they can be a little touchy when to some of these chemicals, a little more susceptible to damage, especially kind of in these transition times where, like last week, it was 80 degrees, and here we are fixing to be 20 degrees. So the grass may have started to wake up just a little bit, and here it is. It don't really know what to do now. So Another product that works well on a lot of these weeds is metsulfuron methyl. MSM turf or manor is kind of the Roundup name, I guess you could say, the trade name that is actually what it is. The metsulfuron methyl is the chemical name. That's the active ingredient. Um, so that one is safe to use on all 4 of our grasses. It's not safe for Bahia grass. It's not labeled for Bahia grass. It will damage Bahia grass. So um, again, this is a table that I pulled straight out of our um, establish and manage your home loan product. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you can expect that I was talking about. It gives you the weed over on the bottom left, and then it has the chemicals for pre-emergence across the top. And if you know you're battling, just say for instance, crabgrass, you want to come around here and you want to find, all right, crabgrass, excellent control, bensilide, benefin, orazolin. So you want to find a product that contains those active ingredients. You want to go to your farm and garden store, your big box store, wherever it is you do your shopping, and find a product that contains those active ingredients. And that's what you want to use for a couple of years, a couple of seasons, until you start seeing, all right, I've got my crabgrass under control now. I've got Lespedeza. Let's go down here and let's find one for Lespedeza. So really good is going to be atrazine. So, and then again, that's kind of what you want to do every season, every year, depending on your weed. And that's really going to help you throughout. So, so right now, again, post-emergent for our winter broadleaves. And then we want to do a pre-emergent right now to prevent our summer annuals. Something that I really like is prodiamine, pendimethalin, orazolin. These are great products. They have a wide variety of weeds that they help control. And they're typically available pretty easily at most all of your farm and garden stores or your big box stores. Just be careful. Right now, you don't want to be applying any type of fertilizer. So make sure whatever you use doesn't have a fertilizer component tied to it. One that I like to recommend a lot because it does not is Scott's Halt's Crabgrass Preventer. It is actually prodiamine and is the active ingredient, and it works extremely well. There's no fertilizer component to it, so you don't have to worry about spending money on the fertilizer component. That's just extra cost. And your grass doesn't need fertilizer right now. It's way too early to be fertilizing. We recommend fertilizing after you've mowed your grass 3 times. Your grass 3 times. Not mowing weeds 3 times, but mowed grass 3 times. So you're looking at end of April, maybe even in the end of May, depending on what part of the state you're in. So, obviously that can change a little bit with the climate, and, we got to have a warm spring. It could be a little earlier, but typically April to May is when we typically start fertilizing. So now is way too early to be putting out any fertilizer. You're just fertilizing the weeds. So some keys to good weed control, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, a healthy turf is your best weed management tool. It prevents weed seeds from germinating. There's just better competition. It shades out those little small weeds. It doesn't let them ever get really established. So a thick, healthy turf is obviously your best tool you got. You need to make sure you properly identify whatever weed it is you have. Proper identification is key. So if you think you're battling crabgrass and you're actually battling goosegrass or Dallas grass, something like that, you may be on the wrong path to prevention and the wrong path to control. The product you're using may not be labeled for use on to kill whatever it is you're after, because think you're after one when you're really after another one. You need to make sure you read and follow the label directions to apply the correct rate. If the label tells you to apply 1 ounce per gallon and you're you think you're mixing it up at 1, but you're really only mixing it up at half an ounce per gallon, then, you know, you're really only teaching that plant to, um, sorry, you know, you're only kind of exposing that plant to a small amount of that herbicide, and it's not really killing the plant. It's just maybe burning it a little bit, or it's kind of stunting the growth of it. But it's, you know, and that's how we get resistance, is by under application. And then on the flip side, if it tells you to apply 1 ounce per gallon of water, 2 ounces isn't twice as good. Obviously, that's hard on your pocketbook. That's hard on the environment, because they put a lot of money and a lot of time into making sure that what they put on that label is what actually works. And then we need to make sure we're uniform when we're applying this chemical. That can cause we can cause some problems later on with our green up and things like that. Maybe have some damage to our turf grass, to our desired turf if we go a little bit heavy. So we just need to make sure we're doing a uniform coverage over the area, whether it be spot treatments or a broadcast treatment. We need to be pretty uniform, and, you know, not sitting there soaking the individual weeds and causing a big buildup of, you know, of herbicide in one location, just a quick mist, you know, and getting it on the leaves of the plant. And then activation of the herbicide on a lot of these is going to be necessary on your pre-emergence. It's going to tell you to apply, and then to apply that chemical and then activate with either like a 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch of water to create that barrier, especially on our granular type pre-emergent herbicides. That activation is key, because if you think about it, if you've got a granular product, you've got little granules that are spaced out in between. So we need to activate that product, melt it down, melt those granules, and to provide that uniform barrier against weeds being germinated in between those granules. So, so make sure you, again, read the label. All of this information can be found on the label. It'll tell you how much to apply per 1,000 square feet, or how much to mix up in a gallon of water. It'll tell you how much rain or how much irrigation to run afterwards. So again, if it tells you to activate it with some type of irrigation or rain, you don't have an irrigation system, obviously you need to time that with a rain event, to where it can be activated. So it'll tell you how long you can wait. You know, it may say within 2 days or within a week of application that you need a rain to activate it. So, you know, all of that is very important, and it saves you a lot of money. So you're not out there just spreading chemical and wasting your time and your money. But again, read and follow all the label directions. Not only is it the law, but it's the right thing to do. You know, we're all obviously are grateful for the products that we have and that we still have available to us to use. We're losing them a lot faster than we're gaining them. So we do need to be environmentally conscious and conscious of our streams and waterways, and not having a lot of runoff with our chemicals and things like that, applying them correctly to where, you know, because that is extremely important, that we take care, be stewards of the environment. So we don't want to be out there over applying and, you know, just being reckless with it by no stretch. So some good references. Again, I will mention it again. P1322, Establish and Manage Your Home Loan, one of the best resources there is, that I use bar none the most. It's not great as far as like weed identification type stuff, but as far as general maintenance, as far as height of cut, when to fertilize, how much to fertilize, you know, obviously that's going to be dictated by doing a soil test. We can tell you what the grass likes, and that's what this publication does. It tells you what each grass needs, but obviously for $8, a soil test is going to be your best bet. It'll tell you what's already in your soil and be able to tell you what to make up the difference with, what type of fertilizer, to be even more accurate. But it tells you height of cut, tells you all kind of the science behind everything, this publication. So it is a great tool to have in your arsenal. Another book that I really like is The Weeds of Southern Turf Grasses. It's a small, like $15 book put out by the University of Florida. Got a lot of good clear pictures to help you identify them. Again, it's not like a dichotomous key where you break it, it breaks down. All right, it's a biennial or it's a broadleaf, and then it's a summer annual. It's just pictures and tells you, you're just gonna have to kind of identify them by the picture. Where Weeds of the South, which again, there's only a few weeds we typically worry about battling too much here in lawns. Now, if you start getting into pasture weeds and forest weeds, things like that, those numbers actually get rather larger. But for the most part, we're battling the same basic weeds lawn from lawn. So, do you need to know every single weed or plant in the Southeast? Probably not, unless you're just wanting to know that kind of stuff. But and then the Weeds of the South, from the Wormslow Foundation, that is a great tool. That's a much larger book, very, very intense and very thorough book. There is my contact information. I know I got about 15 minutes. I try to save here towards the end. I see a couple of chat things up here. I'm kind of scared to click it. I've been scared to click it. I don't know what it was about because I know it can sometimes end my presentation. But I'm fixing to here in just a second. But there's my contact information. Obviously, I'm going to be on here for the next 10 or 15 minutes or however long needed to answer any questions any of you may have. Most county offices do have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter page. You can message us or you can post pictures on there if you're having a problem or there's something that you're curious about. You can email me pictures of weeds that you have in your yard if you're interested in identifying them. Open up the chat box here. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. We treated our lawn about 5 days ago, dry pre and post emergence. Will all the steady rain have a negative impact on the application? No, not really. As long as it didn't come like a frog strangler, gully washer, whatever you want to call it, immediately following that application and it got watered in pretty well, it won't have too negative of effects. Obviously, the more rain falls, the further down it washes that chemical. So, yes, it will have negative, but it's not going to like you need to redo it. It's just going to push it down a little bit below, possibly some of it below where you really want it. But it's better than nothing. I promise you that. You definitely didn't make a mistake. The only thing is you just don't want to make sure, it didn't become like a 4-inch rain in an hour and it all wash it just straight into the ditch or down the driveway. You mentioned the tree giveaway. That was Christian. Mentioned the Crosby Arboretum. As long as it was a good soaking rain, you're good to go. That's the best thing that you could have asked for. That's not going to be a problem at all. Typically, they say with at least a half an inch of rain. Dollar weed control. That's going to be a broadleaf weed. So dollar weed is going to be controlled pretty easily depending on the type of turf grass you have. Either with atrazine if you're using St. Augustine, or if you have St. Augustine or centipede, or you could use a Trimec, one of those Trimec type products that I mentioned that contain 2,4-D, MCPP, or dicamba and sulfentrazone or carfentrazone. Works pretty good on dollar weed or pennywort. Those again, that's going to be a summer annual or summer weed. So probably not. You may seeing some of it out there right now, but it's just kind of sticking around. But yes, just pretty easy to control as far as the weed itself. Now it will come back because dollarweed typically likes a kind of a moist area or a low lying area that stays kind of wet. So, you know, you're probably going to have it come back from either some rhizomes or some type of the root structure. So you may need to look at that habitat that it's growing in. You may need to try to figure out how to increase the drainage or put in a drain or something like that, because typically dollarweed likes a real moist environment, um, moist soil. So Sandy, last year saw something about not killing flower weeds before flowering season because pollinators need these early flowers. Is correct? It definitely helps. You know, the pollinators, they every little thing you can give them is better for them. Now, you know, the pollinators really depend on your quarter of an acre of flowers. Do they really have to have it? No, they don't. Is it helping? Sure. You know, they'll find it and they'll use it, and they'll be grateful for it. I promise you. But you know, you killing out a tenth of an acre of hen bed out of your lawn isn't gonna amount to much of anything. Now, you know, if you have flowers and you have 60 acres and you have pollinators on site, like if you have keep bees or something like that, you know, yeah, you obviously you want to provide as much beneficial food sources to them as possible, um, for honey production or just for pollination. But again, you know, that's in the grand scheme of things that you're not hurting too much just by controlling weeds in your lawn. There are plenty of other sources out there for them. Roadsides probably being the number one, where there are plenty of flowers and plenty of weed flowers for them to gather their nectar and gather their food sources and pollen from this time of year. So whether it be pastures or roadsides, forest lands, you know, a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of different sources. So that kind of gets through our questions in the chat box. Again, I do appreciate everybody being here and taking the time with us today with me. Hopefully, answered a few questions. May have raised more questions than I answered. Um, but I hope I didn't go too fast for everyone. But I wanted to make sure I covered enough of the information to kind of give you a background and leave a little bit of time at the end here to answer some questions. So again,
Hey, Ross.
yes.
Yeah, this is Keith at Harrison County, but I'm going to combine these questions. You can answer them the way you like, but you addressed the rain versus the herbicide. Is if I use a liquid herbicide and there was a great deal of rain and it had been on the ground for 2 days, is that still going to remain effective? That's the first question. Another different question is that if I were going to plug the soil now to aerate the soil, is it now the time to do that? The third question is if I'm using a sticker when I put stuff down, is it best to use a commercial sticker or just liquid soap would work as well? And the last thing is when we get the soil test from state, a lot of times it's addressed commercially. So when they're talking ag lime or to put on the soil, what is the best thing to get locally from, you know, Lowe's or whatever to replace what they're calling ag lime? And that's it.
All right, few different questions there. So we're going to, I think I remember them, the first one being the liquid versus the granular pre-emergence. And yes, even a liquid or liquid pre-emergent needs to be watered in to some extent. Now, again, it's going to depend on the product and the actual, and the amount of rain that you've got to an extent. So they're going to have to be activated and they need to be watered in. So whatever product you had, that label is going to tell you it needs at least a half an inch of rain or a quarter of an inch of rain within 2 or 3 days. So you definitely want to make sure you still water that product in, unless you watered it in with a half an inch of water unless you put out a ½ inch of water mixed with that chemical, which I doubt very seriously you did, that's a lot of water. You're still going to have to activate that chemical. So definitely not a bad thing to have it watered in a couple of days after applying even a liquid herbicide or liquid pre-emergence. The second thing, soil tests. All of our soil tests, I believe, for lawns should be in 1,000 square feet. Now, if you do a vegetable garden, or not a vegetable garden, even the vegetable garden itself, soil test should be in per 1,000 square feet terms. Now, if you do the commercial individual crops like tomato or corn or soybean or the other commercial crops, those may be in per acres. But anything that, like a home vegetable garden or your lawn, any type of turf grass that you do, should be in per 1,000 square foot basis. So I can't really remember exactly what your question was with that. But to break that down, anything, if it recommends putting out anything that it recommends doing by an acre, you just divide it by 43.56. So if it tells you to put out 100 pounds per acre, you divide that 100 divided by 43.56, and that'll tell you how much to put out per 1,000 square foot. They're 43,560 square foot in an acre. So if it tells you to put out 43,560 pounds per acre, that means you need to put out 43.56 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Because there's 43.56, 1,000 square feet parts to an acre, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So like I said, just basically whatever, if it tells you to put out 100 pounds of a product per 1,000 or per acre, you divide that 100 divided by 43. So you're going to put out a little over 2 pounds or so per 1,000 square feet of that product.
Okay.
Fertilizer.
And then plugging the soil, aerating the soil, is now the time?
Now is not a great time to do that. I mean, it's not a bad time, but typically we like to recommend you do that once the soil is growing. You don't want to be out there. You go out there now and you try to plug soil and you get all this rain like we're getting right now. Your ground's going to be soft as all get out. It's going to be a mud pit. So you want to make sure that grass is actively growing to where that ground can dry out. That's one of the main purposes of aerating our soil, is to open that ground up, the soil up, to allow air exchange, to allow nutrients and water to penetrate the soil. So, it's not a bad time to do it again. It's not hurting anything, but it's not the most optimum time. And you're going to be looking at a mud pit, and you're going to have soft ground for 2 or 3 more months now. So, I would wait and at least do it once the grass kind of starts greening up and we kind of get a little bit on the drier side. You do want some water because it will dry out, and you don't want to kill your grass by letting it dry out too much. So you got to kind of give and take. You got to kind of balance it out, as far as you don't want to do it in July and August when we're not getting any rain, and you're going to have to be out there watering it every couple hours during the day because it's 100 degrees and we're not getting any rain for a month. But on the other side, you don't want to do it now where it's going to be turn into a pigsty out there every time you walk on it.
And the surfactant sticker versus liquid soap?
Both work. You get a lot more uniformity, and you know what you're getting with a spreader sticker versus a Dawn dishwashing soap. Now, they do kind of the same thing as far as how well they work and what they do, but to me, the few dollars that you're going to spend on a spreader sticker, you're just getting, what you're getting. You can run into some problems with Dawn dishwashing detergent and stuff in the summertime in the heat, with that burning the plant, with it kind of suffocating that plant. And you don't want to use a heavy horticultural oil in the summertime, but as your spreader sticker, but you know, your surfactants are just, to me, they're a more controlled product. You know what you're getting, and you
Okay.
know what you're putting in there. Where you kind of guess with the Dawn dishwashing detergent, like maybe you know.
Yeah, just
I think
we're
an
big
ounce of this
boys.
is the same as an ounce of the spreader sticker, but you don't really know. So you know, it doesn't. You know, have I done it? Yes, I'm not gonna say I hadn't, but you know, again, if it were me and I had the option of having the spreader sticker, I would use that instead.
Okay, that's all I have. I appreciate
And
you, Ross. Thank
I think you mentioned something about the lime too.
Yeah, the ag lime, because that's what it says when you get the stuff back from state, they usually, that's what I'm used to seeing, is that it addresses it as ag lime.
Yeah, and
What
just
would I
any
buy?
type of lime. It can be dolomitic lime. It can be calcitic lime. It can be pelletized lime. Pelletized lime to me is one of the best things to use on your lawn. It's easy to apply. It's a uniform particle size, so it's you know it's easy to apply. It's not dusty. It's not cakey. It doesn't clog up your spreader. It's all uniform. You know, again, that pelletized lime is basically just a dust that has been glued together in pellets. So you're going to ask, you're going to see a quick reaction because you're going to have a real small particle size that's going to react quickly with water and with the soil. So you're not going to have that sustained reaction where with ag lime you have some powders, you have some fine rocks, you have some bigger gravel type stuff. So all that's going to react slow. The bigger the particle size, the longer it's going to take to react. So you're going to have it's going to last multiple seasons where the pelletized lime is all going to react basically pretty quickly. Um, but you're getting a steady reaction. You know kind of how long it's going to last, and it's easy to apply. It's not dusty. It's not chunky. It's not clogging up your spreader. You know, it's just, to me, for homeowners, it's the way to go. And
Okay.
$3 to $4 a bag for a 40-pound bag. So unless you're treating, you know, acreage per
No.
se, then you may want to look at buying it by the ton. But typically, you know, 2 tons per acre, and you know, a lot of times you're not applying it to a whole acre in a homeowner
Mm-mm.
setting.
No. Oh, that's it. Again, I thank you, Ross.
Yes, sir. A spreader sticker from Samsung and Sandy. That's basically like a surfactant that allows it to break that water tension on the chemical or the product that you're putting out to where, let me see if I can stop sharing my screen here. So basically what happens, if just say this publication, this piece of paper here is the surface of the leaf. So if you spray it with water, a droplet of water sits on there kind of like a basketball. So it has a very small spot that it's sitting on there, depending on the leaf, the type of plant it is. It can have a waxy leaf coating. So if you think about it, a basketball sitting on a table, there's only a small surface area of that basketball that's actually touching the table, kind of like your tire of your truck on the concrete. But a spreader sticker breaks that water tension and allows that water droplet to spread out along that leaf surface to where it can be soaked up by the leaf better. So that spreader sticker basically just breaks the water tension, just like the soap does. If you were to drop salt and pepper in a water and then thing of drop of dishwashing soap in it, you can see how it breaks that water tension and allows those particles to sink. So it basically just allows that chemical to spread out more evenly over the leaf surface. Hope that wasn't too weird and crazy of an explanation, but that's basically what it does. It just